Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a cozy hoodie. For this comfy creation, we kept it simple, using a stitch combination that we love and a relaxed fit, and the aforementioned hood for when you want to be incognito. Speaking of, if you're looking to blend in or stand out from the pack, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of the most modern crochet tutorials and patterns online with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 650 grams of yarn, and that's 800 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 6.5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us which way you cut your sandwiches, in half or diagonally. I cut them diagonally. I don't know how to explain it, but that gives you more sandwich doing it that way. It's science. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 2 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, and single crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 6.5mm hook, and we're all going to start by making an even number chain that reaches from the top of our shoulder down to where I want the bottom of this hoodie to be. So you can make this cropped or full length. I would like for mine to be full length, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 19 inches or 48 centimeters, and that's a chain 80 for me. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row, which is our first mesh stitch row. So where we're at, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That first chain is going to count as our turning chain. That second chain is going to count as our chain, and now we're going to single crochet into that 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, here's 2, 3 is the one that we blocked off, and then 4. Into that 4th chain, we're going to bring our hook down and insert with a single crochet. And that forms our first chain space, and since we also have a single crochet, these are our first 2 stitches. So here's 1, here's 2. Let's do this again. We're all going to chain 1, skip 1 chain into the following with a single crochet. So we have our chain space, our single crochet, our second chain space, our single crochet. So all together we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. We're going to continue to chain 1, skip a chain, and single crochet into that following until we reach the end of the row. We are now at the end of our row 1. Our second row in our 3-row repeat is going to be another mesh stitch row, so all we're going to do is chain 1 and flip our work. Now our second mesh stitch row is going to be a complete repeat of the first one. So just find that first stitch, insert your hook in through there. It should be the single crochet from our previous row, and insert with 1 single. We're going to chain 1. That chain 1 is going to be over that chain 1 from our previous row, and then into that following stitch, which should be a single crochet, insert with a single crochet. So pretty simple. Let's do that again. Chain 1, we're going to skip a stitch, which is going to be the chain space from our previous row, and into that following stitch, which is a single crochet, insert with a single. And that's it. Continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet into that following stitch until you reach the end of the row. Alright, so our row 2 is finished. Now we should have the same amount of stitches as chains that we made, same thing with our row 1, and we want to make sure that we are working into that last chain space as well. As you guys can see, this is my chain 2 when we got started on our previous row, and I did make sure that I single crocheted into that second chain just so I have that last chain space. We should have the same amount of sets and same amount of stitches. I just wanted to meet back and make sure that we're working into there, because this last stitch into every mesh stitch row can easily be overlooked, causing an accidental decrease. But once we have our 2 mesh stitch rows, our following row is going to be a single crochet row. So we're going to chain 1, which I have already done, and flip our work. Now what we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every stitch. So into that first stitch, insert with a single crochet. into that following stitch, which is our chain space. Just insert your hook into that entire chain space with another single crochet, into that following stitch, insert with a single crochet, following stitch, which is our chain space, another single crochet, and make our way down, putting one single crochet into every stitch and chain space. And again, we should have the same amount of stitches as chains made. So we are back, and we have 1, 2, 3 rows all finished up. Now the row sequence for our piece is going to be a repeat of our 2 mesh stitch rows and our single crochet row. So let's just get started on our following row, which is a mesh stitch row. We're going to chain 1, flip our work, and start by inserting 1 single crochet into that first stitch, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, and that's it. Our following row is going to be another mesh stitch row, and then the row right after that is a single crochet row. None of them will have any increases or decreases. We're going to continue to repeat these 3 rows until we have a shoulder portion that can reach from 2 inches past the tip of our shoulder over to the base of our neck. And we will all meet back right after we finish up a single crochet row that ends along the bottom, and the bottom is going to be where our tail end is. So I am back. My shoulder portion is all finished up. I have a total of 21 rows. My width is just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters, and now we're going to get started on our neckline. So first things first, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into an even numbered stitch from the top right where the base of our neck is. So I've inserted my stitch marker into the 16th stitch from the top. That's just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and the top is the opposite from where our tail end is. And what we're going to do from here is the following row in our row sequence. So since we should all be along the bottom, we're going to do our mesh stitch all the way up until we reach our stitch marker. So I am back, and I've just finished up my first mesh stitch row for my neckline. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 mesh stitch and single crochet row sequence with no increases and no decreases until this portion that we have can reach over to the other side of the base of our neck, making sure that we end along the top right after our second mesh stitch row. Then right after that, I will meet you back so we can work straight into the shoulder portion from there. So I am back, and my neckline is all finished. I have a total of 44 rows, and my width is now 12 inches or 30 centimeters, and now we're going to get started on the second shoulder. So all we're going to do is make the same amount of chains as stitches that we skipped when we got started on our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 16 stitches. So along this side, I'm going to make a chain of 16. So once we have our chain, we are going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a single crochet, and that's pretty much it. We're going to make our way all the way down our chain, putting 1 single crochet into every chain, then 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then we're going to continue to repeat our 3 row repeat. So right after the single crochet row, we're going to be doing 2 mesh stitch rows, a single crochet row, and repeat until we have the same amount of shoulder rows as the first shoulder portion. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut. So I am back, and the entirety of my front panel is finished. I have a total of 65 rows, and my width is now 18 inches or 46 centimeters. And right before we get started with the back panel, we are going to need to insert our stitch marker into the middle row that we have for the neckline. So we're all going to count ours out together. What we're going to do is find the first side row that we have for the neckline on both edges. So it should be a mesh stitch row for everyone. So here's my first, and the one on the right side may be a little hard to see, but this is mine right over here. And all we're going to do is count in 1 row at a time until we reach our 1 middle row. So all together, here is 1, 2. Our first 2 rows should be mesh stitch rows. Our following row should be a single crochet row. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then for me, my middle row is my 12th row, which is a single crochet row for everyone. And we're just going to continue to count in 1 side row at a time until we reach our 1 middle row, and then make sure you insert a stitch marker into that side row. Now we can all get started on the back panel, and that's going to be pretty simple. For the back panel, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we made when we started off our front panel. So a chain of 80 for me. And then from there, we're going to continue to do our 2 mesh stitch and 1 single crochet row sequence until we have the total same amount of rows as our front panel. Now the back panel is not going to have that neckline. We're just going to do those 3 rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases. Once we have that all finished up, I'll meet you back so that we can single crochet across the top of our front and back panels. So the entirety of my back panel is all finished. We should have the same amount of rows as our front panel, and now we're just going to single crochet across the top of our back panel. So it's just going to be one single crochet into every side row. Now if you did do a chain up of 1 and cut, go ahead and insert your hook into that top corner stitch of the back panel, or if you didn't, just chain 1, and now we're going to work into our side row. So let's all start by finding our first side row. For everyone, it should be a side mesh stitch row. We're just going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Into our following side row, which should be another mesh stitch row, insert with 1 single crochet. And then into our following side row, which should be a single crochet for everyone, insert into that top loop with another single crochet. And continue with putting 1 single crochet into every side row till we don't have any more side rows left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and we should all have the same amount of stitches as side rows that we have. So our single crochet row across the top of the back panel is finished. Now we're going to single crochet across the top of the front panel. So let's switch out our panels. So all we're going to do is insert our hook into the top corner stitch of the shoulder portion, put 1 single crochet into every side row. Once we reach the corner portion, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat what we did here on the other side. As y'all can see, I already did this side over here. I'll meet you back when we have both of them finished up. Alright, so we have just finished up single crocheting across the tops of our front panel. Now we're going to seam the front and back together. So let's place the front panel on top of the back panel. We are going to be inserting our hook into both the corner stitch of the front and the back panel, and now we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. We're going to pull our yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to single crochet into both the front and the back panel at the same time. So find that first available stitch into the front panel, insert, first available stitch into the back panel, insert, and if you're like me, you have some tail ends, go ahead and place them over your hook if you don't want to weave them in later, and single crochet around everything. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, into that next stitch into the back panel, making sure that your tail ends are still over your hook, and single crochet around everything, and that's it. Continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into the front panel, then do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So I'm back and I've just finished up seaming both of my shoulders, and now we're going to seam up our sides. So first things first, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into a stitch the width that we'd like for our sleeve to be. Now keeping in mind that where we insert our stitch marker is going to determine how wide or how skinny our sleeve is, and I want mine to be just a comfortable fit, not too big, not too small. So I inserted my stitch marker into the 25th stitch from the top. That's just about 7 inches or 18 centimeters. And we do want to make sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seams that we just did for the shoulders are still along the outside. Now we're going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of the front and back panel. And now we're going to do the same seam as our shoulder. So insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And we're going to do a single crochet seam. So find that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And we're going to continue doing this until we reach our stitch marker. When we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, the next thing we're going to do is the length of our sleeve. So first things first, we're going to flip our work right side out, meaning all of our seams are now along the inside, and then we're all going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. From there, we're all going to make an even number chain, the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be, so you can make this 3/4 or full length. I'd like for mine to be full length, so I'm going to make a chain that is 15 inches or 38 centimeters, or a chain of 56. So now that we have our chain, we're going to do our following row, which is a mesh stitch row. So it's going to start off the same way as all of our other mesh stitch rows. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. From there, we're going to single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Into that 4th chain, we're going to bring our hook down, insert with a single crochet, and then per usual, chain 1, skip a stitch into the following single crochet, and continue this until we reach the end of the row. So we've just finished up our row 1. We've made our way all the way down, and now we're going to slip stitch it into the base to connect it. So all we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, and we're going to slip stitch it into there. Now that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, that's just to connect it, and then we're going to work our way up to the following row by slip stitching into that next available stitch as well. So into that next stitch, insert with a slip stitch, so pull through everything. Both of those slip stitches don't count as a stitch, that's just to connect our rows. And now we're going to flip our work and do the following row in our row sequence, which again is a mesh stitch row. So making sure that we're not inserting our hook into any of those slip stitches, just insert your hook into the single crochet from our previous row with another single crochet, chain one, skip a stitch, and then single crochet into the next. Now we're going to continue doing this to reach the end of the row. When we do reach the end of the row, we're going to get started on our following row, which is a single crochet row. So chain one, flip our work, put one single crochet into every stitch and chain, and then I'll meet you back at the base just to connect it once more. So we are back, and our first 1, 2, 3 rows are all finished. Now we're just going to connect it into the base, and then it's going to be a repeat of these 3 rows all the way around our armhole. So connecting it into the base is going to be the same way that we connected our row 1. So just find that next available stitch into the base, insert, yarn over, pull through everything with a slip stitch. Remember that slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch. And then just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch, into the base, flip our work, and our row 4 is going to be a mesh stitch row. So just find that last single crochet, insert with a single crochet, chain 1, there we go, skip a stitch, and single crochet. And that's basically it. We're going to be doing our 2 mesh stitch rows and single crochet row all the way around with no increases and no decreases, connecting it into the base the same way that we just did. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I will meet you back so we can seam everything together. We have made our way all the way around with our sleeve. We don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into, so now we're going to seam everything together. And this is going to be another single crochet seam. So let's flip our work wrong side out, so all of our seams are going to be on the same side. Next, we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And just like all of our other seams, we're going to be single crocheting in through both the front and back panel. So find that first stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, first stitch into the back panel, insert your hook, and single crochet. And we're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. We have just finished up seaming the sleeve and now are ready to get started on our cuff. So let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out. We're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our sleeve, and now we're going to do a single crochet row. So we're all going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. That chain up of 1 does not count as a stitch. And what we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every other side row. So this mesh stitch row is my first side row. If yours is a single crochet row, that's completely fine. Just find that top loop, insert your hook, and insert with 1 single crochet. This is my following side row, which is a single crochet row. We are going to be skipping every other row, so we're going to skip the following row into the next side row, which is a mesh stitch row for me, insert with a single. And just once more, we're going to skip the following row and insert into that next with a single. And we're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. So our single crochet row is all finished up. We have slip stitched into that chain space, and now we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters, so I made a chain of 12. Once we all have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now we're going to slip stitch into that chain that we blocked off. So we're going to bring our hook down into that second chain from our hook, or into the chain that we blocked off. We're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next chain, insert your hook, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. And that's it. We are going to continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly, otherwise the following row can be a little bit too tight to work into. Now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now going to slip stitch it into the base. So into that next available stitch into the base, insert, yarn over, and pull through everything. Now our row 1's connected. And getting started on our following row, we're all going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain, and flip our work. And now we're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that last stitch from our previous row, insert in through that back loop, and all we're going to do is yarn over and gently pull through everything again. Let's do this once more. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert, gently yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook, and we're going to continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of this row, chain one, flip our work, and continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the base just once more. We are back, and we are nearly finished with our first 1, 2, 3 rows, and we're just going to connect it into the base once more. So find that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch to close off our row 3, and then to work our way up to our row 4, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So we are connecting it into the base the same way that we connected the sleeve into the base. And we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into. Then I'll meet you back to seam it all together. So we have made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now let's seam it all together. So this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam. So we're all going to make sure that our work is slipped right side out because the seam is going to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So finding our first available stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert only in through that front loop into that first available stitch. And if it's a little hard, go ahead and tug it apart and insert only in through that front loop. Now into the back panel, we're going to find that first available stitch and insert only into that back loop. When we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. That is our first one. Let's do the next one together. Into the front panel, find that next available stitch and insert your hook only in through that front loop or the loop that's nearest to you. And then into the back panel, insert your hook into that next available stitch and insert only into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from you. Then yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do just one more together. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop, next stitch into the back, insert into that back loop, pull through all 3. And we're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here for the sleeve on the other side. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up doing both of our sleeves and cuffs. We did a chain up of 1 and cut, and now we're going to get started on our hood. So what we're going to do for our hood is make sure the work is slipped right side out, meaning all of the seams that we have for the shoulders, sides, and sleeves are along the inside. And then we're going to be inserting our hook into any one of the stitches that we have along the back of our neckline. Next, we're all going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and then we're just going to do a single crochet row. So just put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Once we reach the neckline, working our way down the front panel, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into each of those stitches. And then once we're working our way across our neckline for the front panel, we're just going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So we should actually have the same amount of single crochets as the back panel because it's the same amount of side rows available here and here. We just want to make sure that once we reach that middle side row that we have within the front panel, we are inserting our stitch marker into the top of that stitch as well because we're going to need to know where the middle is. Once we made our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. Our single crochet row is all finished up, and now we're going to get started on the height of our hood. So we're going to flip our work over, making sure that we're looking at the front panel now, and we're all going to insert our hook into our middle stitch marker stitch. We're then going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. That doesn't count as a stitch, and all we're going to do is single crochet, making our way all the way around, and then put 1 single crochet into that middle stitch again. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that same stitch that our chain 1 is in, so that same middle stitch. We're going to insert with a single crochet, and then into that next stitch with another single crochet, and that's it. Just 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now, like I said, we are going to be single crocheting into our middle stitch once we make our way all the way around again, just so we have a middle point. But right before we do that, double check and make sure that we have an even number of stitches because we are going to have the same row sequence as the row sequence that we had for the body, and it does need to always end on an even number. If you don't have an even number, just add 1 more extra stitch into that last stitch so we have a total of even numbers. And then I'll meet you back. So we have made our way all the way around with our first single crochet row. Now all we're going to do from here is continue on with our row sequence. So right after we have single crocheted into that same middle stitch, this is going to be where our part is. We're all going to chain 1, flip our work, single crochet into that first stitch, skip a stitch, chain 1, single crochet into the next. So same exact sequence as the body. And we're going to continue to repeat our 2 mesh stitch one single crochet row until we get the height of the hood that we want. So once when it reaches the crown of our head. I'll meet you back once we get the height of our hood so that we can seam it all together. So I am back. I now have the length of my hood. I have a total of 56 rows, and that's a total of 15 inches or 38 centimeters. Now from here we are going to seam everything together. So first things first, we are going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, and then we're going to be doing a single crochet seam just like our shoulders and our sides. So how we're going to do that, since the seam does need to be along the inside, we're going to start by pinching our two corners together. We're going to grab the middle of our hood and then pull that through. Then just adjust the two corners that we have so that everything is aligned, nothing is twisted, and then we can get started on our seam. So all together, let's insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, yarn over, pull through everything. And just to do the first one, we're just going to insert our hook into that first stitch into the front panel, into the first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet around everything. And continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of one and cut. So we're back. We have just finished up seaming the entirety of our hood, and now we're just going to single crochet along the edge of it to clean it up. So first things first, we're all going to insert our hook into that stitch marker stitch that we have that's into the middle of our neckline, or if you took it out, it's just going to be in that stitch that our two single crochets are in. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. We are then going to pull through, do a chain up of one to secure, and now we're going to be putting one single crochet into every side row. So starting with our first side single crochet row, we're going to find that top loop, insert your hook with one single crochet. Now this is our following side row, which is a side mesh stitch row. Insert in through that top loop with a single. Our following side mesh stitch row, insert with another single. And just continue doing this, making our way all the way up and over. When we don't have any more side rows left to work into, slip stitch into that same stitch that our stitch marker was in, do a chain up of one and cut. So now that we have just finished up single crocheting along our hood, we're now going to get started on the bottom band. So first things first, let's make sure that our work is slipped right side out, and then we're going to insert our hook into one of the side rows that we have along the bottom. Next, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of one to secure, and we're all going to start with one single crochet into every side row. So we're going to find our first side row, insert your hook into that top loop and single crochet. Let's do that again. Into our following side row, insert into that top loop, insert with a single crochet. And that's basically it. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around, just putting one single crochet into every side row. When we make our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space. So now that our single crochet along the bottom is all finished up, we're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I made a chain of 15. And our bottom band is going to be done exactly like our cuff. So as a refresher, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off with a second chain from our hook, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. Let's do that again. Into that next chain, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And that's basically it. We're going to make our way down to the base, making sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch. Once we reach the base, we're going to slip stitch it into the base the same way that we did for the cuff. And then we're going to continue on with back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it together. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into, so now let's seam it together. And it is going to be seamed the same way that we did our cuff, so let's do the first. We're all going to start by inserting our hook into the corner stitch of the front and back panel, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. And now just to do the first one, we're all going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. Next, we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And when we don't, let's do a chain up of one and cut. So we have just finished up seaming our bottom band and we are all done. The last thing we have to do is weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all next one. Bye.